we get started here? Thank you everybody for joining us this afternoon. If you didn't get a chance to see our presentation earlier, my name is Akash Savdharia. I am the co-founder and CEO of Patheer. Today I'm joined with my CTO, Matthew Harris. And since it is a small group, I know our topic is on using graph databases and skills map for career development. So throughout the presentation, if there are questions, just please feel free to raise your hand, and we'll try to make this as more informative for you as possible. To start off with, I'd like to provide just brief backgrounds on both myself and Matthew. Prior to starting Patheer, I come actually from a strategy consulting background. I worked for Cognizant Technology Solutions and led many different web and mobile application projects, primarily in the biotech and pharma space. And most notably, actually, we launched one of the first patient-friendly mobile apps. And Matthew actually has extensive experience both in database architecture and design, and he actually used to work for well-known organizations like Walt Disney as well as Walter School. So our agenda actually for today is we're going to talk really kind of about our story, which revolved around some of the 3 career development problems that us as founders faced, which led us to really evaluate the marketplace and see, okay, what sorts of new technologies can we implement as the HR landscape is evolving to really show and solve some of the challenges that we have. And so we're going to go into the innovative approach. Matthew will jump in and share a little bit about the skills maps and the graph databases, and we're going to wrap up by showing how Patheer can really be leveraged at organizations. So quick overview of our story actually. Prior to starting Patheer, each one of these use cases that you're seeing are actually the founders of Patheer, and we all had our different story in terms of career development at organizations. I was, again, previously a consultant at Cognizant, and some of my challenges dealt with talent mobility. Where can I go from here? Our second founder, Dennis Harris, his challenge really was around skills development. He wanted to understand what skills does he need to move internally. And then Matthew was really around engagement at his organization. He wanted to understand what he could do to be more engaged at work. So talent mobility. My previous organization, the biggest challenge I had is I was in the position for 2 years, and I really wanted to understand what are some of the other opportunities that I have, in terms of vertical lateral movement. We had a simple career portal where you could go and see job opportunities, but nowhere really where I could, analyze my background and see, okay, with some of the skills that I have today, what are the other positions that are possible for me? At the same time, really understand, is there a platform, is there a way that I can track my conversations with my manager so that there is a future and there is a way for me to reach some of the aspirational goals that I had. So that was, challenge number 1 from a career development perspective. For our second founder, Dennis Harris, it was really around skills development. Dennis his story is actually really unique. He was in a position where he was utilizing both, business expertise and knowledge along with technical skills. And as he, advanced in his career, he understood that, hey, I want to play more in the technical role space and I want to develop more technical skills. However, at his organization, there really wasn't a way for him to see, okay, the skills that I have today and some of the technical roles and aspirations that I want to reach, what are those gaps? And is there any training or learning the organization can provide? And really, the process was broken. The company had an LMS, but it really wasn't able to show him, hey, for this role that you're looking at, these are the gaps you have, take advantage of them. There was a broken process there. And then Matthew, our third founder, he had been with this position for almost 5 years and really pretty much excelled in his career. So in terms of position-wise, there wasn't any issues, but what he was really looking for is how do you get more involved besides the networking events the company had. Is there a way that I can connect with others within the organization as I grow more senior in my role that may have some of the same career interests or skills? Is there a way that he could be more engaged through a system or platform where he could be notified of, hey, some of these career opportunities that are growing, and they could be pushed to him, whether it's through a mobile device or a web platform or even an email. And at the same time, as those opportunities arise, is there a way to get updates in real time on, hey, there's new training programs available at the company, and this is closely aligned with your background? Is there ways to really bring those together and be more engaged in terms of not only working about your day-to-day tasks? So really, why did we open up with our story in terms of mine with talent mobility and Dennis's with skills development and Matthew's around direct engagement at work? The fact is, we all left our organizations, and there's more Akash's and Dennis's and Matthew's in companies today. And what the common theme is if they're not able to figure out how they can grow or develop the right skills, the norm for millennials, and it's only going to increase, is to job hop. You're in a position for 2 years, and it's easier today for them to find an external opportunity for growth than inside the company. So our stories actually are not the only one-offs. There's actually more of these within companies today. So the consequences, and some of you already know, they've always been broadcasted, but it really breaks down into 3 categories. You have separation costs, replacement costs, and then loss of productivity. Separation costs are more commonly like every time an employee leaves, you can have a severance package associated with it, and any sort of legal type associations. And then you have replacement costs, which is your recruitment costs, your time to hire, not including the learning curve for the new employee, which goes pretty much into the 3rd cost, loss of productivity. And so, really, as the marketplace is evolving, there is a need for time to change. The current employee life cycle is pretty broken. Organizations spend astronomical dollars acquiring employees, but what happens is those same employees make uninformed job changes within the company. There's no aspirational role that they have in mind that they're working towards, and so that leads them at some point, becoming bored or unhappy or challenged. And again, the use case is the same. It's easier to hop on a LinkedIn or an Indeed.com to find an external role than actually looking at a larger company on a role that you can move maybe laterally, not necessarily vertically. So there needs to be a paradigm shift where organizations need to think about this, because the talent war and the skills gap is only going to be increasing. And we have talked to some forward-thinking and progressive organizations, and they're looking for more of an innovative approach. And the innovative approach really revolves around providing tools in the marketplace that allow employees to make more insight-driven career moves internally, allow them to develop skills through a platform with a purpose in mind, and the eventual goal for doing this is actually to retain those employees. So now I want to pause, and we really want to go down and explain why the new technologies that are emerging in the HR landscape really enable to have a solution like this, whereas before that wasn't possible. So I want to introduce Matthew. We'll talk a little bit more on our technology.
So I'm going to do my best not to tech jargon it all up and make it all complex. But right now, these tools that we're talking about, the new way of getting your employees to engage and provide them with good career development tools are going to require new innovative technologies. The features involve more of a big data approach. So you have all these old technologies in your organization, and they can't necessarily handle all this large data processing and the analytics that you want to get. They can, but it would involve a lot of customization, and it would be very, very time intensive. So we move into new technologies, and these new technologies are databases and systems that have come out just recently in the past 10 years. So what we do at Patheer, we focus in on our database technology because it all starts with our data, and once you get good data, you can provide good analytics to people. So what I'm going to go into, I'm going to go more so into the old database systems, the new databases, and then why we use the graph databases, and kind of pick up on some of the features that we're using today that are going to be very innovative in the HR space. So when I say old databases, I'm talking legacy SQL databases, tabular formatted relational database systems. The original reason that these were created were for big finance and accounting systems. So you can think of just transactional data. You're talking sales data or finance data or any accounting, just stuff you typically store in an Excel spreadsheet. So when you think about all the new technologies coming out today, I think the best example is a social media website. You could take an individual and you can think of many different relationships off that individual. How they're connected to a person, are they connected by a skill or an event or just interests that they commonly share, or maybe they know a friend of a friend. And you can imagine how difficult it would be to store all that information just in an Excel sheet or an old transactional database. So you get very, very complex. So what's coming out now is you have a lot of innovations happening in the data world where people are creating databases just for specific purposes. And so you have different NoSQL, semi-unstructured data. And when I say unstructured data, just think of things where it's not transactional, where it's not going to be the same. Where each individual person can be different and different objects can be stored. So I just threw up some examples here. You have different column stores, different collections, and then of course the graph database. And we'll go into the graph database. What is a graph database and who else are using them? So a graph database is a NoSQL database, and you can think of it as just different connections of relating to you based off of skills or anything. Just how you relate to a person or how you relate even to an organization, just common interests. So a good example that I want to bring up is an organization chart within a company. And we're going to look at John Doe. John Doe manages Jason Smith, Jill Pale, and Matt Jams. I don't know how I came up with those names, but so he manages 3 people, and then he reports to Tyler Bott. And you can say, okay, this isn't too complex. I think I can store this in an Excel spreadsheet and manage it that way. But what if your organization, John Doe managed 1,000 people, then Jason Smith managed 1,000 people? The org chart can be quite complex and hard to manage. So in a graph database, it simplifies this process, makes it a lot easier to grab the data, to analyze the data. And you can even do different relationships. So if John Doe, maybe he knows that Jason Smith likes a certain basketball or something, and they both like basketball. You can relate them to that way. Or maybe Jason Smith has the same skill set as Jill Pale. So there's endless possibilities that you can do with the graph database in terms of understanding where things relate. And of course, eventually you can map the skills to certain jobs and see how people, how their skill sets are being utilized. In terms of who are using graph databases, and not many people know this, there's a lot of large organizations moving into the graph database world to map out these relationships in their companies, and not necessarily just for company data, they're using it for their applications themselves. So a good example, maybe with Walmart, they're mapping out how a particular shopper shops. Like what kind of items is he putting in a shopping cart, and map different and similar products that others are buying. So how do we use graph databases? The one thing that we do is we analyze career paths. And once we analyze career paths, we can analyze what others did to reach career goals and provide others recommendations on how to grow within the company based off of what others did. So a good example would be, how do I become a data analyst? Well, how do people research this now? People go on Google and they research different skill sets they need for data analyst. We take it a step further and show them different paths that people took. Maybe it's another position that they need to go in between, but we make those recommendations. And what can I do with a particular skill? Maybe there's a skill set that an employee really likes and he wants to go into more detail with it. How can I advance my career with it? We could show different career options associated with that particular skill. And of course, more of an advanced search, if you don't know what you want to do or you have an idea, you can input your background and get more recommendations based off of what's specific to you. So in terms of our recommendations, you can see that an example I have on the bottom is the employee. He has a bachelor's degree. He went into data entry and now he's a data admin and he wants to become a data analyst. So we can provide 3 different path options that he can take. And what we have is what is he missing in terms of getting to those next steps? What are his skills gaps? And we'll go a little bit more into that in the second feature in the skills maps. But this is just utilizing data that you all have within your organizations today. Your basic HR data, your market data, employee background data, and additional information can be inputted just from the employee to get those missing information. So analyzing the skills maps now, once the employee kind of figures out what they want to do, they can see what skills they're missing to. They can also see where their skills transfer to, what skills they currently have and what other positions they can go into, and then learn what skills are required for a particular position. So I'm just going to put up this, we have a skills map. It might be a little bit blurry. Can you guys read it? Nope. Okay, so maybe, so there's basically two paths. You can hover over a particular skill and it'll show you different positions that can go with that particular skill. And if you hover over a skill, it'll show the other positions that you can utilize or go into off of that skill. So just a summary. So now with the influx of these new technologies, organizations will be in a better position to analyze all the data that they have. They'll be able to not only provide the data analysis and reports to their employees, but be able to provide smarter recommendations. And additionally, they'll be able to provide insight-driven action plans as opposed to just static, non-personalized data to the employees. And so now I'm going to turn it over to Akash. If you guys have any questions on the technology, we'll just turn it over to him. He can summarize up. Oh, okay. Thanks.
So we went over kind of the 3 career development problems that kind of led us to develop the solution. And then Matthew kind of talked about how now, with the new technologies that are emerging, we're able to analyze that data and solve them. So why should organizations really care? It's really because there are employees like myself out in the organization that really want to understand if there's internal opportunities for growth. There's people like Dennis, who's another one of our founders. We're looking, hey, what do I need to do to understand my skills gap for the roles that I'm truly interested in? And then there's people like our third founder, Matthew, who want to figure out, okay, how do I get more engaged at work? They do exist, and these questions are questions that HR organizations should start asking and start being more proactive on how they can answer yes to. And how can Patheer truly help in answering yes to some of these questions? Well, we can help on the employee side because we can show all the career destination possibilities for employees. We can show, hey, if you do have skill gaps, how can you really drive a more informed career development plan? And then for the organization, we do have analytics, but the whole goal really is helping to build that talent pipeline. We want to be able to show that, hey, with the solution, technology solution, you can show that you do care about driving development in terms of your employees, and also care about filling key roles with talent that's ready from within. And the whole goal would be to have more of an engaged and higher performing workforce. So I think now we really want to make it interactive. If you have questions on technology, just the overall concept, or about the space and how it's evolving, both Matthew and I want to just really make it informative for you. Yeah.
Is there a manager view into this? So I've got an open position. Does it gives me kind of candidates within my organization that have the skills that would match my open position?
Yeah. So we have an HR view on a larger level and a manager dashboard. And what it does is, as employees express interest in these different career possibilities, it'll alert and say, okay, for some of these roles, here's some of the internal employees that are expressing interest, and here's what their background looks like. So we do have that, yep.
Just to add to that too, one thing we've been really working on is the ability for someone to input, like say they have a particular role and they know that it requires X amount of skills. For you to input those skills and to see which employees in your organization that you have would be best to fit that. And maybe it's a good advancement opportunity for one of them. So we're still working on that internal mobility aspect behind it for HR.
Any other questions?
So when you talk about skills for positions, do you have a skills bank that exists, or would you rely on the client to kind of provide what skills they want to put in, or is it more dynamic so that basically you would adapt to whatever's being entered by the employee?
So we have three options that we can do. One is we actually have our own skills library that the organization can use. There's two. Option two is we can analyze the current employee data and say, okay, for some of the roles that the employees are in, what are the skills that they have today? And then option three is, I think what you mentioned, if they have skill information that are mapped to roles, we can just use that data. So it really breaks down into those three categories. Anyone else? Yeah, go ahead.
So what skills they have is one side of it. Is there opportunity to kind of pull in also if you have performance data on that employee? So, their skills match up, but maybe they, have a bad attitude or something like that, where you would say, well, you have the skills, but you really need to work on something else that's outside of what maybe you need other than that.
So as we start kind of evolving, a lot of the companies that we're talking to are also, talking about, hey, can you pull in information on performance management? And the answer today for us and our solution is no, but is that the direction that we're headed in? Absolutely. Because, this is not the first time we're hearing it. It's going to be a big thing because they want to tie, career development and the performance and the roles today together. So today, no, but absolutely. That's on our roadmap. Yeah.
So you have the data warehouse. How would you load in?
So let's say the company's using an HRIS like Workday. We actually have a third-party API integrator that is cross-platform. So whether you're using a Workday or like a Tele or a SuccessFactors, it's able to pull in the data and also push out the data back into the system.
What sort of time frame would companies be looking at to be able to put this in?
So in terms of an implementation,
Yeah.
it would take 1 month implementation. So the first 2 weeks are really just understanding the core data set and the type of systems that you're using. And then with the API, we would just plug in.
Just to add to that too,
Yeah.
if you don't want to use, if you don't have custom company data, it's just plug and play. Like literally, you can have people sign up for it within the next day. So it just depends. Most companies want their custom data in there, some mapping related back to, you know, the organization. But we do have a general data set that we tend to test out with people, and they like it, and then it eventually adapts into their own.
Anyone else? All right. Well, we do have a booth upstairs. We were supposed to bring out our flyers and business cards, but did we bring
I
out?
have a few business cards.
Oh, okay.
If anyone wants
You know,
them.
after the session, if you want to stop by and chat with us one-on-one, you can do that. But I think that pretty much wraps up our presentation. Thank you. So we're actually starting on our first social children's organization just in the month. And so it's one more pilot to do. So what does that look like? Yeah, right. All right, thank you. Have a good day.